There we go. Hey, Walt.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks
Walter.
to Comcast, our internet went down for a minute. So,
All right, so what was the last thing you were saying before we were winding down to bring our guest in?
oh yeah, I don't remember where you left off.
I said
You kind of
before we
froze up.
introduce her and let you do the introductions, was there anything else you want to talk about for this past week?
Oh no, I'm good.
That'll be fun to edit. Thank you. All right, so with that, how about I let you introduce our guest, and I will figure out where to cut this in.
You.
You and my wife, I'm like the worst editing sessions in the world. Like, how do I make this work?
Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge, a podcast very much like our format where we, instead of watching a movie 1 minute at a time, we talk to a guest and learn a little bit about their life 1 moment at a time. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Alan Sanders.
I am your other one of your hosts, Walt Murray.
And Walt, I mean, I know this is we always record ahead of time. For those folks who don't know how podcasting works, we're not live. So this is something that's recorded ahead of time, and then we replay it or play it in a week or so out there. But you had a chance to fill in for me on 3 hours of talk radio. How was that?
Well, the last hour went really well. The first 2 hours, I would say I was learning from my mistakes. So, but no, it was good. I enjoyed it. Got to cover some good news stories, which I normally don't get to talk about. Got to talk about the Golden Ray, which is a ship that flipped over here off the coast of Georgia, and then as they were trying to remove it, caught fire, and so had that in the news, and just some other cool stuff. So that's something, usually even when I come into the radio station, I'm sitting at microphone 2. So right. I'm not running the board. I'm not having to do any of that kind of stuff. So it was great to be on the other side of that and have to kind of work on the fly. I even answered a phone call from a listener and, felt like a real radio person. So it was great.
Well, one of the things I can tell you is where you might have had a couple of missteps with the technology, which is basically learning how to run the stupid computer. That's nearly not important. The fact that you brought content and you were able to talk for 3 hours and bring that content in an engaging way, I mean, that's really why people listen. You screw up where a commercial comes in, or, you kind of halfway come into a soundbite. It is what it is. So congratulations, man. I really appreciate you covering for me. I thought it was fantastic.
Well, and I think I only played music over somebody talking once or twice.
You did like that Van Halen clip. You were really big on trying to play that at least 6 times. So,
well,
a little Panama.
I love Van Halen. So, and for some reason, you have no Grateful Dead on your board. So I should have.
No, there's a very good reason for that. I'm not a big Grateful Dead fan, so. I'm more into, me, I'm more metal and 80s hard rock and all the hair band stuff. So I still love using those kind of bumps. And that's the music of my teenage and college years. And that's just what I grew up with. I still gravitate toward that. While you were doing that, I was busy hanging out with my wife and my father-in-law and his extended family down in Florida. We went to Daytona Beach. I got to tell you, it was awesome. We picked the perfect week or weekend for me there to go because we didn't get above 82 degrees. We had a constant breeze off the ocean of about 20 miles an hour. The only downside, which I didn't know this because I don't live on the Atlantic, so I'm not aware of like all of the different nuances of the cyclical cycles of when things come ashore and not. But apparently this is the time of year when all the kelp is rolling ashore and then rotting and smelling like dead fish on the beach for a few weeks before it all goes away.
Fantastic.
So there was these piles and piles of just this kelp that was drying out, getting crusty, and eventually withering away. And people were dealing with it. People were just setting up chairs in between or brushing it around and just sitting there. But it was a little different. I'd never had to deal with that before going to the ocean. Usually, I guess we go a little bit later in the year when the school's out. We usually go more late June, early July. So I didn't know that happened in mid to late May.
Well, whenever you take a beach vacation or anything like that, nature has its own timetable. So nature usually doesn't check with you about your schedule before doing whatever it does.
No, not so much. I will tell you, it was energizing. There is something about being either on the water, by the water, and then when you had a combination of water and the sound of waves, that white noise of water crashing, I sat there and just felt, you don't realize how much stress and things build up over time, even when you love what you do. I mean, it's been 3.5 years since I've taken a vacation day, and to take a couple of days off to fly to Daytona Beach and just be by the water, enjoy some beach music, enjoy a couple of Mai Tais. Boy, those are strong. And then some other adult beverage, walking around. It was just like decompressing. It just felt great.
Yeah. Well, my youngest, who I don't think has slept 4 hours since she was born, as soon as she gets to the beach every time, and she's 15 now, she just is out. Like the sound of the waves and just the feel of the ocean, she's gone. And I'm getting more and more like that as I get older. It just is such a relaxing place.
It's just such a great feeling. And I know there's some people that don't like the beach, but I don't know how you just can't like the water. I even woke up the day before, or the day we left, and it was about 5:45. I guess I'm so used to waking up early anyway for the morning. And I said, you know what? We're leaving. Let's go watch watch sunrise. And it was just something great to just watch the sun come up over the horizon on the water and watch it reflect. And just such, I don't know, just you feel like you're one with your surroundings. You just feel like all the little tiny things that we kind of get all bent out of shape over don't mean anything anymore.
Yeah. And I definitely enjoy the mornings and the evenings at the beach. Being that I am of Irish descent, I can put on aluminum foil and still burn. So I have to take it easy midday whenever the sun's out. So, yeah. But you're right. There is just a real relaxing thing about being there. And of course, the seafood is awesome.
Well, yeah, my wife, doesn't like seafood, but I would say what she doesn't like either is the fact that I've been doing so much outside work, but I always wear either a t-shirt or something. So I had the farmer's tan going on. You could tell I had like a milk white chest and shoulder, but then like from mid shoulder down was golden brown from all the work I've done outside. Mm-hmm. And needless to say, since I'm always working outside, I'm wearing jeans because I learned a long time ago, cutting the lawn, weed whacking, anything like that. For me, I always manage to kick something up that breaks the skin of my shins. So I just always wear jeans. So I had pasty white legs, a milky white chest, and golden arms. I looked like something out of a weird science fiction novel.
Now you look like a tourist.
Well, she said, okay, don't put any sunscreen on your arms, but don't put any on your body yet. Get a little sun and then put it on so you don't burn, but then that we can try to even you out. So that's my goal, apparently, is I have a to-do of evening out my tan before we go, I don't know, on the lake next with friends.
Right.
She goes, you look like a freak. I'm like, thanks, babe. Love you too.
Well, even when I'm on the boat, I still wear a shirt just because I've burned so many times. I know I'm a prime candidate for all kinds of problems, but I also just don't like walking around for 3 days in pain and having people come up and hit me on the back and make me scream like a 10-year-old.
Yeah, no, I'm not afraid to put on the sunscreen and put it on multiple times. I know what it's like to have gotten that. There's nothing cool to me about having the burn that's so bad you don't even want a sheet touching your bare skin. So I'm like, right. No, I don't do that.
Well, my brother, who of course has a master's degree, is one of the smartest people I know. It's kind of a dummy, and he went to Panama City with some friends one time and used no sunscreen the entire day. And of course, Panama City has that white sand, so the sun is just reflecting right off of it.
Oh, it's off the water, off the sand.
Off, everything. He got burned so bad he couldn't put his shoes on because the blisters are so big. He walked in the doctor's office, and the doctor literally looked at him and said, "Oh, dear Lord, what happened to you?"
That's not
good.
What
you want to hear from your doctor.
He's going to have to check himself for skin cancer now the rest of his life.
He's already had some treatments to make sure that, to kill some precancerous stuff. Ugh. So, yeah, not the smartest move.
Well, you know what? I know it's going to be a little bit of a slower week for me. I'm just glad to be back. I'm glad you were able to cover for me. And the important thing is, if things come up, like you said, we talked afterwards, you felt more comfortable this second time covering than the first time. And so at this point, something were to happen, I need you at a split second, you'd be ready to go.
Oh yeah, I feel like now after that third hour, I could just walk in and jump on and make it happen.
Cool. Well, before we bring our guests, which I'm going to let you do the intro again, because another one of the guests that you've managed to lasso into our web of ill repute here on the Wilder Ride in the Listeners Lounge. Anything else that's been going on this week you want to talk about?
No, I really am looking forward to having our guest on tonight. So, yeah, Amanda and I met in one of the podcast groups, I believe. Of folks who host podcasts and deal with podcast issues. And I was just looking at her IMDb background and was super impressed with a couple of things. Number one, some of the stuff that she's worked on, but also, you hear a lot about women working in the entertainment industry and how difficult that can be. And she seems to be one of those people that's figured out the formula on having an awesome career in entertainment. So, as a producer and other stuff. So I'm really looking forward to hearing her story. And we bring on another New Yorker. She's from Syracuse. And so just looking forward to hearing Amanda's story tonight.
All right, well then let's do it. Audience, put your hands together. Let's welcome to our Listeners Lounge stage, Amanda Raymond. Amanda, welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's good to be here.
I can't wait to get into this. We just love meeting so many really cool and interesting people, and more importantly, about hearing their story. And so we always start off pretty much the same with each guest, because we always want to know, how did you get to where you are? So let's go in the Wayback Machine. Let's put the DeLorean up to 88, go back and say, when did you know a career in the entertainment industry was calling your name?
Oh gosh, since I was a little kid. I mean, I remember back either in kindergarten or first grade, I was like, I'm going to be a movie star and I'm going to go to Hollywood. And I was going to own a horse farm and a bunch of other things that didn't end up happening. But no, I've always loved film. My dad was a huge influence on me, and our entertainment has always been watching movies together. And like, he introduced me to like the old classics. It happened one night, Day the Earth Stood Still. The Beatles, Hard Day's Night. It's like, so I've grown up watching all of these classic films and just having a real love and appreciation for them.
All right. So that's early on. Of course, we all have those kinds of dreams, but as you start to move along, you have to decide, is there talent there? Is there something that can be honed and refined? So where did you find yourself where were you gravitating toward, maybe in middle and high school, that still kept that focus of entertainment somewhere in your future?
Well, I thought I wanted to be a Disney animator for a while. I wanted to be an actress and I wanted to be a Disney animator, classically trained. So I did the animation, the flipping the pages, and, I knew who all the 9 old men were of Disney, if anyone who's a Disney fan and knows those gentlemen. But that was just such a goal of mine. And then I got suckered into acting in Beauty and the Beast. A friend of mine says, that's your favorite Disney movie. You should go audition. I'm like, I'm not an actor. So I went and auditioned. I am getting the lead. And then I got bit by the acting bug. I was like, ooh, well, this is really fun. So then that kind of, I was doing art and I was doing animation and also acting at the same time. I ended up going to Syracuse University, where they had this dual art and drama major. I was like, well, this is perfect. I get to do both things. But you do eventually have to end up choosing. But because of both backgrounds, I did move out to LA initially for acting, did some bit parts, some commercials, nothing to write home about. And then I started temping at Nickelodeon just to kind of pay the bills. And they're like, geez, you know a lot about animation. Why are you not working here? I was like, because I want to be an actress. Like, well, guess what? We'll let you be a PA and work here, but you can't be going off to Santa Monica for 3 hours for audition and then come back. So you kind of got to make a choice. Mm-hmm. So I ended up working animation for a number of years on the production side of things, and then still kind of doing acting peripherally. And then I was at Disney, I was at Nickelodeon. And then when I was at Disney TV animation, the Disney feature animation, I ended up in marketing and publicity, and I started doing behind the scenes for live action. And then a good friend of mine brought me, and he's like, oh, well, you're great with production, animation. I'm going to bring you to Sid the Science Kid for Henson, which was their mocap show. So it was real-time animation also, but, live action production kind of intermingled, which was amazing. And I kind of got the bug for wanting to be on a live action set. And then he brought me on to a couple of Blumhouse movies. I became a director's assistant on a number of those. And after that, then I was like, well, I want to direct. And so I had watched these men, and like how they were with talent and what they did, and kind of looking at all the different departments. And I was like, yeah, I can figure this out. And so then I eventually ended up directing a short, and then the short ended up leading to a feature. And now I have several other features that are lining up over the next year and change.
Wow. That's the summary. So we want to go back and look at and dive into a little bit. I mean, acting is something that you got to have a little bit of a talent for, but that's great because to be able to have that presence on stage, I think transcends into a lot of other areas because you really do need to know how to, quote, perform in other areas of your life.
Oh, absolutely. And I always like to say that I'm an actor's director because I understand the reason for the motivation. It's not like, okay, yes, on camera, it looks better for you to go from, left screen to right screen. And it's just like, well, why? Okay, well, you're really struggling. And it's like the camera's going to move really slow. So just you're sluggish. You're just feeling like, oh, the weight of the world's on my shoulders. And like, okay, yeah, I get it. I get it. You don't have to overact, direct us. Like, okay. But no, and it's been great because as an actor, you have to get into the character's head and understand the character. And as a writer as well, I write stuff that I would want to play as a performer. And so it's like, there are no throwaway characters in my mind. There are no, small parts, there's small-minded actors, as they say. And everything is, I always want everything to be real. I mean, I care about the costumes that everybody wears, whether it's the background, whether it's, just some guy that passes by as a waiter. They're all important.
Mm-hmm.
So I think acting was really, really good for me as a director. And I switched from acting and art to being a psychology major at Syracuse University, because I figured that's also a very good way to understanding the complexities of character and human nature. And it can be used in really any area of film.
Hey, Walt, does that sound familiar? Considering your co-host here has a psychology degree, got into theater, did acting, then directing, and now owns a video production company.
Yeah, there you go.
They do all work very well together, though.
They do.
So when you were doing the art side of things early in your career, was there a certain path that you were looking at going down as you did that? Was that something you were looking at as your career, or is that something that you were looking at as a stepping stone to other things?
Well, when I wanted to be an animator, I loved like Glenn Keane and Mark Henn and Andreas Deja, and the way that they could just draw on the page, and it was just beautiful. And I just really wanted to be able to do something like that. And be able to watch and as they were like, walking around and posing, and you get to draw it from real life. And I just thought that was fascinating. And I never really had the idea that I wanted to direct until I kind of started doing the live action portion of it. Because I thought I wanted to be a producer and I would produce, but I wanted to be a creative producer. I didn't like, the line producing of it, like the budgets and the schedules and numbers. And certainly I look at those and I understand those, but that wasn't what made me happy. The creative is always what has made me happy. And then when I realized, well, the producer is kind of helping the director. And when I seen the producer was making creative decisions with the director in one of the movies at Disney, I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. That's fun.
Yeah, I can see for someone who has struggled to even draw stick figures over the years, I've always been amazed at anybody who can capture something and make it look like it's supposed to look like, if you're drawing a dragon or a person or whatever. And so I've always been fascinated by that complex art. I had a friend in college who was a painter, and every once in a while I'd just go by her studio there at the college and just watch her method and watch how she did it. And it was just amazing to me that you could actually make something on paper or on canvas look like something in real life. It is something that escapes me of how that works, but it's really cool. And then when you look at it in an animated short or in an animated movie, that is really, really incredible that people can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, I just got done watching a couple of documentaries. I got Disney Plus just recently, and they were doing a Pixar kind of like mini documentary series, interviewing certain people that are on the Pixar animation team. And the second episode was with one of their artists, and she was talking about how I have to always be on the lookout of what to draw based on what's around me, looking for inspiration all the time. And sometimes I'll suddenly realize I haven't been paying attention to my own street or where I'm walking or the shop I'm in. And if I focus on what I'm looking at, I'll suddenly see colors or patterns or things that I was just sort of glossing over because I wasn't really looking.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was just interesting from an animator's perspective, always looking at inspiration from wherever you happen to be.
Well, I think that's a director's perspective too, in live action, animation and both live action, because there's certainly things that I've walked a million times or seen. And when it's like all of a sudden when I'm in the middle of prep for something and I'm thinking about shots, I'm suddenly looking, and as I'm walking past the trees, I'm like, oh, this is a really cool pan, or, just little things like that. I'm like, oh, I could kind of take this and move this around. And that's a really great flower. And it's just, it's like almost like very, it's a beautiful mind, and how like the numbers just kind of come off the page, and all of a sudden it's like you're hyper focused on everything around you.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you, as you made that transition, did you find that having that art background has helped you as a director?
Oh, absolutely. Because my short film, I actually storyboarded the entire thing myself. And so looking back on the short and looking back on the boards, I was like, yeah, pretty much shot for shot is what I ended up doing and what the short ended up being.
That is pretty awesome, because I guess a lot of times the directors do not storyboard the movie themselves.
Or they'll work with an artist, because a lot of times, because I can't draw, what I'll do is usually write out my shot list, and then I work with someone who wants to then draw out what we think we're going to do. But, okay, from a director's perspective, though, what's really cool, I think, is if you're doing your job correctly, the easiest edits are always on paper before you get on set. So you should be doing that due diligence ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
as much as you can. Like with the feature, I knew I couldn't board the entire feature myself because there was so little prep time as it was before we had to start shooting. And it's like, and I heard the story about a friend of mine who had tried to storyboard his entire feature, and he had a nervous breakdown. And so I was just like, I don't want that to happen to me. So I brought
that would be bad.
I brought in an animation storyboard artist that I knew, that I really respected his work, and he hadn't really done live action boards before. So at first it was a very interesting process, because he's used to overdrawing. It's like you're doing the frame this way, and then a frame turning the head, and then the hand comes up, and I'm like, no, we don't need that much. I just need the shot.
Too much detail. I need to get kind of a rough idea how to compose the shot. I'll fix it when I get there. Right.
Yeah. And when it's same as, it's like, that's the why. We don't need to carry that. I don't need another board of that. Like, I got it. That's the establishing. It's like, just the new frames is what I need. He's like, oh, okay.
So the first feature you did, you actually wrote it as well, right?
I did. It was a script that was brought to me by the producers. I did a page 1 rewrite on it. And it was, the script, like I knew it needed a lot of work, and was one of those things in the beginning where I kind of like tiptoed around it, because I didn't know how much they loved the script. And so it's like, I mean, it needs some changes. I would, I would kind of change this, and, I'm not sure about this character in there, because he doesn't really seem to have a purpose. And she's like, we already know the script needs work. So just, feel free to just dissect it as much as you want. And I said, oh, well, if that's the case, I'll do a side-by-side outline, and I will tell you just how structurally I'm going to completely revise this. It's going to be, it's still essentially the core of the same theme and the same movie. But, and they said, yeah, that sounds great. So then I did an outline, I approved the outline. And then from the various outline drafts, I then went to script.
And what was the name of said movie?
It was originally called Gift of an Angel.
Okay. And what did it eventually become?
It eventually became You Are My Home, which I still hate the title. I went from Gift of an Angel to Imaginary Lines, because I loved how Imaginary Lines is what that is. I mean, the lines between, Mexico and Texas, and it's not really, it's an arbitrary line. There's not like a fence there that's like, okay, this is a demarcation. That's like, they are imaginary. And it was a line that was in the movie that one of my actors had delivered. And I was like, that's the movie. And so we all had agreed on it, and we really liked the message. But, then at the end of the day, Netflix and other people wanted it to sound a little more quote unquote hallmarky. So they went with You Are My Home, which is very generic and boring.
But I love the air quote, a little more hallmarky. But, isn't that how Hollywood people talk very quickly? They say, well, I've got this idea. It's a little like this with a little like that with this kind of a spin. And you kind of use these big like signposts to help sell your idea quickly.
Yeah, it's like My Little Pony meets Walking Dead. Okay, I get it.
Now that I would watch.
All right, let me ask this question for a Netflix series or Netflix movie. How much, because as a kind of, I'm guessing, even though you've been in the industry, always that first time feature director, there's always, it seems to be more, let's be careful, we need someone to direct, but we also don't know what she's capable of. How much constraint did you feel with that first feature?
Well, they brought me on because they liked my short, and they saw the potential there because of the short. I kind of had for what I could bring on and what I could do, I did have a lot of freedom in terms of like what I was shooting, which was really nice. There were certain parameters that they wanted. They wanted it to look a certain way and to be, because it's, kind of there's Christmas elements to it, not like a full on Christmas movie, but, they didn't want it super dark and edgy and handheld all over the place. But other than that, that's what kind of like the only parameters they really had. And there certainly are some things that they would turn to me and say, hey, wouldn't it be great if we put this in there? I was like, no. Wouldn't it be great if there's all this snow that's coming down? And it's like, it's Southern Texas. Yeah. Like, let's be real.
Remember where we are here. So were they listed as like producers, or were they sort of like liaisons from Netflix? Like, I guess I'm curious how because Netflix is a huge entity now, and they do so many different straight to Netflix projects. Obviously, they're getting known for putting on some very, very good original content series as well. So I don't know how does that work? Was it considered an executive producer making those calls? Were they line producers? Who was representing Netflix saying, "Hey, you want to try this?" and you saying no?
Well, it was completely independently financed, and it was what we call a negative pickup. So it was after the movie was done, the producers then took it around to shop it to different places to sell it, and then Netflix picked it up.
Gotcha. Okay. So you'd already had completed it beforehand.
Correct.
It wasn't a Netflix project per se.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. So then let me ask the next question then. Instead of that, because since I thought it was a Netflix thing, how did you go about making sure that you had the financing to put a crew together and know what your budget was going to be? How much of that business side did you have to kind of lock down before you could do anything creative?
I wasn't really involved in that part of it. I wish I had been more. And all I will say is that you learn a lot from other people. And I have learned a lot moving forward of things you need to do as a producer, things you need to be aware of. It was an amazing learning experience on both sides for me.
But obviously with your, because it feels like you're so excited about talking about other projects in the works, it didn't darken your mood about being a director. You just learned, and you feel like this is something you enjoy doing now. Yeah.
I mean, like I will say there was the director's cut, which I was incredibly proud of. And then what ended up happening in the long term is they added a voiceover throughout the whole movie, which I never liked. I felt the movie didn't need it. I felt like I didn't need to tell people what they're actually seeing on screen. If it's something that's additional storytelling, that's literally inside their head that then we're not seeing. It's like, oh, this reminds me, I'm seeing this light. And when my mom was 5, she told me there was this light in my grandma's house. That it's like, that's new information. I don't need, here's me walking down the street doing yada, yada. Like that literally drives me nuts. And then there was this whole opening scene that we shot it in Southern Texas. And we had a whole scene at the Rio Grande when the parents have just crossed over. It's 11 years prior to the little girl being born. The mother's pregnant, because that actually has happened a number of times where women that are pregnant have actually crossed over the river because they want their child to be born in the United States of America. And I really wanted to show that, but I was told it was a little too political. So I lost my whole opening scene, which I was very sad about.
See, that's the part that I guess everyone should hear a little bit, that there are forces, no matter how unique your vision, at the very beginning, there are going to be compromises. And I guess you have to decide, where are you okay making some of those along the way in your career?
Yes. Which hill do you want to die on? So that's always the question.
Right. And unfortunately, you don't necessarily know which are the good fights and not. You just hope that you're making the right friendships and networking along the way, that you can continue to keep doing this, which, everybody we've ever interviewed along that path, they're all saying the same thing. You just want to make sure that you get the next project, because you're only as good as your last work, they say. Exactly.
So that, and then the whole pandemic thing happened. And so that kind of delayed things quite a bit. I went off and I produced a TV series over the summer that had Kevin Sorbo and Barry Botswick and Tia Carrere and John Lovitz in it. And so that's, being finished and still looking for a home. But so I went off and produced that while I was waiting for other things to kind of take off, because, the whole industry was essentially shut down. But now it's picking up again, which is great.
Is that the show that you were in Hawaii working on?
No, that was a short film. I actually, friends of mine had wanted me to go visit Hawaii, and they're like, we would love for you to direct and write a short film for us, all expenses paid. Well, I'm like, great. Sounds good. Plus, I really wanted to see them, and shooting in Hawaii is never a bad thing.
No.
I was going to say that would be a rough place to work. I was so envious when you were there.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. I mean, and regardless of what ends up happening with the short, it was a wonderful experience with really good people. And it was just, for me too, it's always that after the last thing, it's like, can I still direct? Do I even know what I'm doing? Because it's been over a year, so for me, it was just good to kind of go in and, oh yeah, no, I still know what I'm doing. I can still do this. I'm not, it's like getting on a bike, but there's always that fear. It's like going on my next feature. It was nice to kind of have this as a springboard to kind of jump into the next thing and just remind myself that, I still have the ability to do this.
With the feature project, I'm just curious because they said, you kind of were brought in to direct. So how much control did you have in terms of casting, locations, things like that? How much say-so were you given, or were a lot of those decisions already kind of either in the works or finalized before they kind of put you in the director's chair?
No, I got to pick all the locations. Thank goodness. I mean, they would give me a bunch of options and I'd be like, yep, that sounds good. Like we did some location scouts. I flew out there beforehand and looked around. I was like, yeah, I like this. Can we secure this? This is great. Walk into a coffee shop, like, hey, can we shoot here? It's like, yeah, okay, let's make it happen. Yay. Thank you. And obviously we didn't get everything that we wanted, but the people in Harlingen and McAllen were very gracious, and they just, were very kind, and anything like, oh yeah, we'll figure that out. We'll get that for you. You want, all the street lights up for Christmas in advance? Yeah, we'll do that for you. Like, they were just wonderful.
What about casting?
And for casting as well, we had, Alyssa Milano, Angel Parker, Christian, they consulted me on everything. I mean, I was in the casting sessions. It's like we agreed on everybody, which was great. We were on the same page with cast, which I was very grateful for.
Very cool. Because I know a lot of people think that the director does everything, but depending on, the other forces and the financiers that are behind the scenes, they can have a lot of influence over what happens on a production.
Well, I will say for all the leads, I had to say, but there were some investors, kids or friends or what have you, that part of the deal was that they had to be cast in the movie. And that happens all the time. This person needs a walk-on. This person needs to have their kids in the background. There's, and of course you're happy to oblige, because the reason you're there is because they're helping you out. So sure.
So when you are, I guess you're not early in your career, but how is it working with people who have been in the industry for a long time, been in front of the camera for years? And I know they're difficult personalities and then easier people to work with. But do you really find it easier to work with people who've been in front of the camera for a long time, or do you find them to be a little bit more resistant to taking direction? How is that?
No, I love people that have a ton of experience, because I learned from them. Alyssa has been acting since she was a little kid, and she was so good to me as a director, and it's like, and she would ask me things. She would certainly challenge me, but in a very professional and critical way that was not, she was challenging me in a very positive way, and to be like, well, I don't think my character would necessarily do this way, because I was like, oh, you know what? Let's do it. She's going to be coming and this is going to be the way. She's like, yes. So she was incredibly collaborative, and, it's just like, oh, I think she'd like walk off. Like, I just walked out of frame, didn't I? I'm like, yep. Like, let me back it up. Like she just knew. I mean, her instincts are amazing. Like, I would work with her again in a heartbeat. So I know, and Christian as well. I mean, he was great. He was even, my DP, it's like, cause he's been doing this so many years too. And he's like, I noticed that for me, it's better sometimes if when I do this or that, because this side of my face, whatever it is. And I was like, huh, all right. Yeah. Let's, it's like, is it okay if I add this one line? Cause I feel like he would just feel so bad for this little girl. He would just want to add this one more thing. And I was like, absolutely. And I like when actors want to play. I mean, that's what we're there for. We're there to all collaborate and have a good time. And, I'd love to hear other people's ideas.
That probably goes back to you having an acting background or a passion for being in front of the camera, because I think that does make a better director for at least the actors. I know I've always thought that there are two kinds of directors. There are those that think of actors as nothing more than biological props. Just go where I say, do what I tell you to do. I'm thinking of a big picture, a tapestry, this big giant vision, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But then there are also the actors, directors who are looking for that performance and encouraging and trying experimentation. Say, okay, well, let's try a take this way just to see just to see. And I think those are always the sets I've enjoyed being on a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. And the actors enjoy it too, and it's just, they'll do something. And it's like, Yeah, that was great. Like, we're going to use it that way. That's fantastic. Like, that was good. Was that good? They still always, no matter who you are, they still always want that validation, which is one thing I always found interesting, because I was just like, you care what I think? It's like, well, yeah, I mean, everyone wants to know they did a good job. So that's one thing I've also had to kind of learn and do too, is, once they've done a scene, it's like, that was fantastic, or like, nailed it, we got it. And I'll just do it. Okay, moving on. Like, well, did you like it? Did you hate it? I got to think back in my own shoes as an actor. It's just like, you want that feedback, it's like, did I knock it out of the park, or was it passable?
That's interesting. So how is it working with somebody like John Lovitz, who is a big comedy personality in front of the camera? And of course, we know him for a lot of outrageous characters, but how is it working with somebody like that, who is kind of a large character?
He's funny. He is so funny on and off camera. He had his little dog with him, who was the cutest little thing. We all loved his dog. And he was just happy to be working, because it was in the middle of the pandemic, and a lot of people on the show were just grateful to be back on set, so the environment was really, really positive.
That's awesome. So I'm trying to keep an eye on the time here when we're cruising along, and I love hearing these stories. When it came to your feature, and I love learning a little bit, maybe some anecdotes behind the scenes, were there any moments where you just were like, I have no idea how we're going to do this, but I can't let anybody else know this?
I can think of one in particular, and this is a story I share a lot from the movie, but we lost our generator. So we ran out of a couple of hours of daylight when we were shooting one day, and we were getting close to the end of the day, and we were losing light. And we still had 3 more scene shots to kind of set up. And I was like, we're never going to make our day. So I was like, oh God, I'm like, well, I got to make this work in a oneer somehow. And so I had this idea. I was like, wait, I put the camera down here and back, and then it shoots all the way through from this room into that room into that room. When she leans in, we can do that. She comes in, she turns to her head, and she runs out, and they run out together. And I can do that. And then my DP is looking at me, he's like, that's never going to work. It's like, yes, it is.
Thanks for the confidence.
And it's just like, well, we have to move everything in this room to set up that shot. I was like, yeah, I know. And so, I'm just sitting there with my arms folded. I'm just like looking at him, like, I have no idea if that shot's going to line up. I'm so screwed if it doesn't. So thankfully, when the camera was positioned, it did go all the way through to both rooms. I was like, oh, thank you, Lord.
But sometimes
it's one of my favorite shots.
It's like accidents on set. You have to, and I think that is another thing a director needs to be able to do. It's one thing to have your storyboards. It's one thing to have scouted your location, but things happen, and you have to be able to be nimble on your toes and improvise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, I think having a vision for where you're going with the movie or the TV show that you're working with, and understanding the feel for what it's, what you want to come across to the audience, that probably helps a lot when you do run into those kind of problems, and helping you get to that solution point.
Yeah, because we wanted to have a Christmas tree scene where they were picking out a Christmas tree, and it was going to be like a walk and talk through the Christmas thing. And then I was thinking, I'm like, oh gosh, I have to kind of make this work in another scene. But what is the core of that scene? So we literally took out almost 2.5 pages of the script, because I was like, that was going to be this lovely little scene walking through the thing, but now it has to be stationary just in a church with one Christmas scene. And I was just like, what are the key points of that scene that the audience needs to know? The rest of that is all just, shoe leather. Let's just get rid of it. So we just cut it out, because it's like, you can't be married to anything you write or anything that's in your head. It's like, what is best for the film? One
of the concepts we hear about with writers often, and I think it does transcend into film, is you have to be able to kill your darlings. The idea that you've filmed or written this beautiful moment, but it can be either paired or completely removed because it doesn't really move the story along like you want it to. Did you find yourself in any of those situations when you're looking at the final edit, when you're in the suite, looking at the dailies and deciding, God, beautiful shot, well acted, just I can't use it?
There was less of that, I think, in the edit room, but I know when we were shooting, there was a scene that I really wanted with Alyssa and the little girl, after her mom had passed, and they're kind of walking by, and then her dog is missing, and there's this poster, and she has this kind of little mini meltdown, and Alyssa's there kind of taking care of her. And it was this really beautiful moment between the two of them. But because of Alyssa's schedule, she actually had to leave early. So we had to try to consolidate her scenes into one day. And so it's like, how badly do you need that scene? So I don't need it. I love it, but I understand it's like the priorities. We needed to hit the driving scene. We need to get this other thing. Like those I have to tell the story. And that is not absolutely necessary. So it killed me to not have that scene, but you know, it is what it is.
So that was based on schedule. That forced your hand. What about in the editing room? I know you said there was less of it, but you've done other things. Have you been where you just realize this is slowing down the scene too much? As much as I like it, I need to keep it moving. It just feels like that sense of it's dragging or something's not working.
Yeah, when I was doing my short, there was a whole scene in this bar where the guy is like missing, the woman that has died in a plane crash, and the bartender's kind of talking to him, and he does this kind of little card trick, and he just kind of pulls out like the Queen of Hearts, and he's like, it was a woman that was on the plane. So the bartender kind of has like kind of this mystical personality, and you're kind of like, what's his story? What's his deal? But the card trick never really looked the right way. Like the actor had rehearsed a number of times, but he still just could not get it quick and fluid enough on camera. And then I realized it was really just kind of like, it was bogging it down. So it reminds me of Walt Disney had said there was a scene, and I've actually seen it. It was a fully animated, but not colored, in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And it's called Singing in My Soup. And all the dwarfs are sitting around and like they're singing about having their soup. It's this beautifully little drawn scene, but he's like, it doesn't move the story along. So he had cut it. And so I remember I had that in mind when I was watching that. I was like, yeah, I know we shot it. We spent a lot of time getting this right and having him practice it and everything else, but it's got to go.
Well, and that's got to be tough because sometimes I'm sure you have that as an idol in your mind of this has to be in there and this has to work. And then
like,
kind of shoot your idol and say, nope, just can't do it.
Yeah.
But that's that nimbleness you need to have, that flexibility. And I think that does make a more successful career path when you can do that quickly versus being so hung up you can't make a decision. The last thing you need is a director who's paralyzed.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I felt bad because another friend of mine was actually in the short too. And she had a little cameo, and the same thing, like the scene just didn't work. It just, and so I had to wait until the whole thing was done. I'm like, so she's like, oh, that's so great. It's over. I said, so I'm really sorry your dress is in it, but you're
you see the corner of your hem. All right. Well, I know one of the things you mentioned kind of almost at the beginning is you've got some irons in the fire. So what's on the horizon with the stuff that you're working on right now?
So the next thing that I am directing, like I have two things. One I can't quite talk about yet because of the producers involved. It's a fairly bigger thing, but I have a rom-com that I'm going to be directing that I also wrote. And that one is about a guy who is telling all his friends that he's kind of a player because he's like, oh, I'm dating Molly, I'm dating Vanessa, I'm dating Sarah, and his boss is even kind of like, dude, you're going to get your ass handed to you if you're dating all these different women. And he's like, not going to happen. And then what you come to find out is that he's actually dating a woman that has dissociative identity disorder, or DID. And so, he's like, it's great. I never know who I'm going to get. Like one night she's the girl next door. The next night, she's like this, rocker chick who's just, like wearing Marilyn Manson makeup. And it's fantastic, but then like this other kind of like exorcist personality comes out and it's like, don't ask us about the others or you'll never see this girl again. He's like, oh, snap, this is serious. So what he realizes is that he actually has OCD, and with trying to help her with her disorder, he's learning a lot about himself and kind of training, help for himself. And it's been reviewed with consultants that, are very familiar with both disorders, have 39 years of experience in the film, because I really want to portray it authentically and accurately.
That's really cool. It does have that sort of the 51st dates vibe. You never know in this case versus personalities. It's always like reinventing yourself every time. This one is almost like learning how to be what that person's looking for in their relationship each time because they're always changing, which is kind of wild as a premise.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. I can't talk about the cast yet. It's going to be a fun surprise, but we have some really good people involved.
Now, is this something that has already got a distributor associated, or are you hoping to shop it to somebody like a Netflix or an Amazon or something like that?
Yeah, we already have a sales company involved. So excellent.
So that takes a lot of weight off your shoulders when you've kind of already got a path for you for where it's going to go.
Absolutely.
Well, Amanda, I wanted to ask, Alan and I both are fathers of daughters. I have 3. Alan has 7 or 8,
4.
I think. 4.
4, but
Seems like
girls
7 or
always
8.
travel in packs, so we always have had extras.
Every time I'm around them, I guess there are extras that have come along with them. But, so both of us have, as we look at entertainment and we look at that world, that is an industry that in a lot of ways has been dominated by men over the years. How have you found it to break into the industry? And as your career is growing, do you still find some resistance, or do you find people pretty open to you as you're moving forward?
Oh, it's incredibly difficult. And I don't think I was ever quite as aware as the amount of like misogyny and sexism until I started rising up. It's like when you're an assistant starting off, everyone's virtually treated the same. But then as like, okay, I'm a producer, I'm that, and you're in a room and you're noticing they're addressing all the men in the room, but they're not looking at you. It's like, I'm not just the producer, I also wrote the script. So there's definitely still a lot of that happens. There's still definitely a sense of being an old boys club, especially with like the older generations. But it's opening up. I think a lot of the studios are wanting more female directors or wanting more female writers, or at least they say that they are. So I hope that that's the truth, and I hope that trend continues. And I do hope things can keep opening up, but it's definitely, it's not there yet.
And I hate hearing that, but I also know strides are being made. One of the things I think Walt and I both have told our daughters is never let anyone tell you you're not capable of doing something. You need to push and push and push. Don't let someone else tell you you're not able to do something.
No. And there's going to be people all around you that are telling you like, oh, this idea has been done before. Oh, this is no good. Oh, this isn't. And actually Oprah's book, it's The Path. I feel bad. I can't remember the name of the book right now, but in it, she interviews all these different people that, pretty much have been told like, you're no good, you're never going to be worth anything. And they just kind of like went against all odds and said, no, this is my passion. This is my dream. This is what I want to do, and it's like the only person who can ever give up on you is you.
Is that The Path Made Clear?
The Path Made Clear. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. The Path Made Clear was a great audiobook for me to listen to. And when I was really struggling with something on my own, hearing that was really inspiring and motivational for me.
Well, and the that hard sort of like fine line, as I always tell my girls this as well, is you're not going to be great at everything. So you've got to be self-aware enough to know this isn't your career. This, as much as you may want to do it, if you're no good at it, you have to learn to accept it. But if you know you're good, if you believe and how do you, it's hard because you have to be self-aware. But if you have a skill and a passion and a talent, just keep pushing. You got to keep pushing because so many people we've met across 2 seasons of interviewing people in our podcast, almost all have at the core that same story of, I just never gave up. I just figured if I just keep pushing, something was going to happen. Sometimes it ended up being a side career that they didn't know. And sometimes it was the exact career they wanted. Or sometimes they stumbled into a career they had no idea was going to be their passion. It was because they never gave up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, how I ended up I was in my studio publicity at Disney for all behind the scenes. We worked for like Marvel, Pixar, Lucasfilm, Disney live action, Disney animation, Disney nature. I was temping in HR at Disney. And then a friend of a friend had introduced me to who was like head of behind the scenes in EPK and BTS. And so they just happened to have an opening and I met with them and liked her. And at that time, I didn't even know what B-roll was like, but I had that drive and that passion. She's like, I'm going to take a chance on you. And I'm very grateful. And I learned so much. I never knew I wanted to be in publicity and marketing or that I would like it because I wasn't aware of that world, but I really had a knack for it. I had a lot of fun for many years.
All right, we're starting to get close to we'll quote, end of the interview segment. I don't want to rush us because I know you're going to hang out with us for a little bit. But if you had advice, because we do have daughters, but, we also have a lot of younger, Gen Z type listeners, a lot of millennials who sometimes that generation sort of feels like, just give me the job. I don't want to necessarily earn it. What do you tell the audience from your career and your successes and the things that you've had to push? What do you say about that sort of mentality of, I should just get it because I am?
I'll be as diplomatic about this as possible. But I had to work my way up. I was a PA. I was a producer's assistant, an executive assistant, a production secretary, a coordinator, a production manager. And so it was important for me to know all those different steps along the way. Whereas I feel, the sense of entitlement that I get of a lot of younger people now, where it's just like, oh, I'm just graduating college now. It's like, how do you pitch to Netflix? And there's a part of me that just wants to strangle them and say, you got to pay your dues, honey. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
8 years from now, here's how you pitch to Netflix.
Yeah. And it's not just that, it's like not that you don't deserve it. It's just that you need to be prepared. You need to have the skills. You need to know if they go in there and they don't like the idea, you're not going to collapse and crumble and just wither up and die. You really have to build a thick skin. You have to know who you are. You have to know what you want to do. You have to have life experiences. And that's all really important.
We talked about you being nimble on the set. I don't think you can necessarily, some people are, there are the Steven Spielbergs that are just, gifted beyond belief at birth. But the more you've experienced in that world prepares you to be able to, you understand how lighting works. You understand how the sound design works. You understand how the actors feel. You understand how production works. So you have a better sense of how to solution the answer you're looking for. And I think sometimes by wanting to skip the experience, you tend to miss out on how you can be more successful later.
And what I always say to people is like, go out and get life experiences for sure, especially as writers. Like you can't learn that from a book. You can't learn that at a writer's room. You can't even learn that in a class. It's like, go off and do, crazy things within reason and legally. But, it's like,
legally-ish.
Have some experiences that you can write intelligently about. It makes more sense if you're going to write about something you've actually experienced versus something like you've never done before. Go try that. You want to write about skydiving? Then I guess go do it. You're not going to really know intuitively like what that experience is. Like you have to actually have that experience.
Yeah, I remember in college, we were probably like 19 or 20, and one of my friends said, I'm going to be the next Hunter Thompson. And I was like, dude, like Hunter Thompson has been writing about his life forever, and he does all this crazy crap. Like, you're not Hunter Thompson. you can't just say, that's what I'm going to be.
Right.
That's his life. And so I think that is a problem that I see a lot with younger people now, is that they just haven't had life yet.
And I really encourage people, if they can, if they want to be a director, to try to shadow a director and do intern programs and, see every different department on set, spend a day with grip and electrics, spend a day with production design, spend a day with wardrobe and hair and makeup, and just really understand, because then when you can know how long it takes to get somebody in the chair and out of the chair for hair and makeup, what the production designer is looking, how they work with the DP. It's your director on the set, and it's like, you just ut this movie. It's like, oh yeah, I need them right now. It's like, well, you wanted curls in their hair and you wanted this and that. Right. Like they're not going to be ready in 10 minutes. just things that are going to be really useful for you to know. It's like, okay, well, I know it's going to take at least this long for them to get in hair and makeup. So let's go set up this other shot, or let's go take the other camera and go grab some B-roll of this building, because I know we have the time. Mm-hmm. Like you don't have to keep asking your first AD or asking people around you. It's like, you're just going to know. And that just makes you that much more effective as a director.
By the way, that also makes you feel more, I don't say make you, I mean, you become more competent on the set. That gains the trust of all those around you. And let's face it, every film is a cooperative effort. You need everyone on their A game to get the best possible outcome. You can't be just one person.
Yeah. And I love all the different departments. It's like I've done cosplay, so I understand, creating costumes. I understand wardrobe. I'm being an artist and wanting to be an animator. I get production design. I get looking at things and saying, okay, I know period stuff. I'm very big into Victorian stuff in the 50s. And so I look at that stuff and I want that to be accurate. So I don't good skills.
And I would think also that allows you to be a lot more relaxed on set and not just a big bundle of stress. And I would think that on a set like that, if you're kind of, going like crazy and your hair's on fire, and that has to affect how everybody else does their jobs and how crazy their jobs become.
No, you're the leader. You're the captain of the ship. It's like you have to set the tone. And if like the director is stressed out or angry or frustrated, it's like that trickles down to literally everybody. You have to be not the boss. You have to be the leader. And there's a big difference.
Right.
There's a big difference.
Huge difference. As we always try to ask this question as we start to wind down. Obviously, your career is nowhere close to over. You've been working and working and working, but you're getting those not only writing nods that you've been doing your whole life, but now you're in the director's chair and you're taking your project forward. Where does Amanda see herself 5 years from now, based on this current trajectory? Where are you going to be?
Directing a Star Wars movie.
Really?
Awesome.
Really?
That would be the dream. That would be the goal. Kathy Kennedy is listening.
So, okay, that's something we didn't even touch on, because you've been talking about these, set pieces in like Texas, real world, real emotions, then a rom-com, but still dealing with real personality issues or mental health issues. Now you're talking about sci-fi fantasy. So where did that come from?
Oh gosh, the same thing. My dad introduced me to Star Wars when I was very little. So Star Wars, Star Trek. I'm a huge nerd. I go to all the Comic Cons. I've been to Dragon Con. I've been to WonderCon. You know, I cosplay. I dress up. I do the whole thing.
That is awesome. That's fantastic. I love it. I love hearing that. That just, once again, it gives you're like you're a real person. You're not this celebrity from on high that nobody can identify with. You're a real, everyday, ordinary person who's got loves and pursuits, and I think that's fantastic.
You.
Well, and when you start talking Star Trek and Star Wars, you're getting our attention. So.
We all said perked up.
Yeah, we hope you'll be directing one of those as well.
Absolutely. I do want to give you a chance to talk about your novel. I read online that you did write a novel, tried your hand as a novelist, and now that you've moved more towards screenplays, do you have a favorite, or does it matter to you? Just writing you love to do, period.
Well, Son of Sherlock was my first book. I was actually going to work on the sequel. That's still pending, but scripts have kind of taken the priority because the scripts are faster, and then those goes up and running, then you're in production, and then you just kind of don't have time to do the book thing. But I really enjoyed that. I mean, I was always a big Sherlockian as a kid, and it was just something I'm like, what if, and I made it very canon because I always like to stay as true and traditional as possible. And I'm like, it really fits within the Conan Doyle canon of the original stories. It's squeezed in there. And I actually had started developing it as a TV series. So I have like a pilot and Bible that I'd put together, and I had pitched it actually to Legendary, and then I ended up going with Enola Holmes because they wanted a female protagonist. So I lost out there, but I haven't given up. And that's the key. Don't ever give up. Maybe in 20 years, it'll be a thing.
Never. Actually, when you started describing it and what I had read for the title, I was like, that could make a really cool series. The son of Sherlock, though. Can he live up to his dad's shadow? How much does he learn, and how much does he still have to learn? And sort of that young Encyclopedia Brown, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually a really good comparison. So there was a lot of interest. And then the thing you always get is like, oh, people don't want to do period. It's like, well, no, they do want to do period. But, it's like, I'm not Sean Ryan, and I'm, not Matt Weiner. It's like, I'm not one of those people yet.
Well, and obviously not Joss Whedon, but I mean, I just got done watching the first half of the season 1 of The Nevers, set in Victorian England, but sort of a sci-fi bent to it. I don't know if you've watched that on HBO Max. I was enthralled. It's fantastic. It is great. And it's all in the Victorian age. So the era of manners and watching all of the houses of parliament and people that are part of the government versus the common street people. It's fantastic. It is really, really worth watching. So check it out.
I will definitely check it out. Yeah.
Well, and I think what people want at the end of the day, whether it be a period piece or otherwise, people want a good story.
Yes.
And I think with all the other stuff, I mean, Marvel is genius because they've got all the great special effects, and they've got the great actors, and they've got all that, but they're telling a great story.
First and foremost, actually.
Yeah, first and foremost. And so I think that smart viewers gravitate towards those great stories. And it seems like you're on the right path to get there. So I'm excited to watch what comes next for you and where you're going.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Before we move into our, which you may or may not like, because we have a horrible movie review segment coming your way.
Like the polar opposite of where you are.
Because you are joining us on a bit of a hiatus, and you may have to drop off, just in case. If anybody is listening now that didn't know a whole lot about you, obviously IMDb is a great resource, but do you have social media? Do you have a website for your company? We didn't even talk about your own production company. How can people learn a little bit more, or maybe even reach out if they have a question? Can they reach out to you?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm a big fan of, if people just don't send me unsolicited scripts or, shorts or, whatever. Hey, watch my movie like that. That's a huge pet peeve of mine. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. If people want to politely ask me and say, hey, would you mind having a look at this? Depending on my time. I mean, it's like, I'm happy to help people out. So yeah, but sometimes it may take me a while. So, if you send me a script, don't check in 2 days later. If I say I'm going to read it, it's like, did you read it? Did you read it? What's going on?
Yeah. That's that whole life lesson thing we have to learn and teach people.
People are awesome, aren't they?
People are fantastic. That's why I have 5 dogs. I'd rather hang out with my dogs on most days. So you are on social media. You do engage and chat with people as you have time. what about your production company? How did that start off? I know we're going to move into Walt's segment, but I wanted to hit that very quickly because I saw your email address and I was like, oh, that's obviously a production company. So is that your company or something that you started or you co-founded? What is that?
Yes. Yeah, it is my production company. 13 Curse Productions is a production company that I founded several years ago when I first started kind of getting into the directing and the producing, since we do TV and we do film and animation. And it's based on an old road in upstate New York in Syracuse, where I'm originally from. So I want something that was close to home. And the 13 Curves is a allegedly haunted road. It's 13 curves in this very windy, twisty road. And the legend is that a bride and groom went over the cliff. And so to this day, they're still kind of looking for each other. It was like way back in the day. And so it's always looking for the bride or looking for the groom. And so, on Halloween or Friday the 13th, we'd always like go there as kids. And it's like, no, I don't know anything, but it was a great urban legend.
That's fantastic. My wife's from actually upstate New York. Is a huge Syracuse fan, turned me on to NCAA basketball and following now the Orange, I guess. And
Nice.
She's from actually Sherburne, which is really close to Colgate University, but has always been a huge fan of Syracuse. So you're in good company in this household already.
Aw, hey, go Orange.
All right. Well, you're going to hang out for a little bit. So let's go quickly now to our next segment.
God, what is this? Stop it! I gotta get me out of this house!
And Walt, you always put out in our Facebook listeners group, we have a private listeners group, The Wilder Ride. If you're brand new, you should join our listeners group because you get to decide what hell to put Walt through because he puts a poll out of 3 really great movies and you get to review one. Which one did you get to review this week?
Well, once again, wondering why I agreed to do this. I got to review the cinematic disaster called Arachnoquake.
Arachnoquake.
Yes, Arachnoquake. Now, the good thing is this does answer one important question for me. Whatever happened to Edward Furlong?
Oh, from Terminator 2. T2.
Terminator 2, yes, sir. And he is the star of this show. Also, you might remember the name Ethan Phillips if you're a Star Trek Voyager fan. He played Neelix.
Okay.
So you have Edward Furlong and Ethan Phillips in this absolute piece of cinematic crap. So IMDb gives it a 2.8.
I believe we've hit a new low.
This is a new low. I mean, we have seen some really shitty movies that have been in the 3s. This is not in the 3s.
Wow.
Now it is better. It is more watchable than some of those. But the write-up here is really funny because it says, an earthquake triggers a brood of giant fire-breathing spiders to attack the city of New Orleans. That's not really true.
Okay, that's a trend lately. In every one of the last 4 or 5 of these movies, you read what the script supposedly is about or the plot's about, and you go, but after watching it, that's not what it's about.
No, it's not. And the first fire-breathing spider doesn't even make an appearance until minute 39 of the movie. I honestly think that what happened was that they're shooting this movie and they're like, wait, how do we kill them? And they made the decision that they were going to be fire-breathing after they had already gone through about 39 or 40 minutes of the movie being shot and decided, okay, well, let's make them fire-breathing so that we can figure out a way to blow them up. Which the science is a little
shaky.
Yeah, shaky.
Kind of like Lavalantula or like big ass spider or something.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but not that well thought through. It's just like they showed up that day and said, okay, what are we shooting today? They do get into some politics out of absolutely nowhere. And they go into this big anti-fracking message in the middle of this. And that becomes what's causing these spiders to show up and destroy the city of New Orleans. So it's really bizarre. But the movie is oddly watchable. You kind of get to a point with it where they have 4 or 5 different things going on. And you don't really care about the characters. You have no emotional investment in it, but you do get to a point where you're like, okay, I do want to see how they wrap this up. It's almost like how do they get the cars all pulled apart from this really horrible traffic accident? So it's oddly watchable. There are a couple of funny parts in it where they're getting on the bus and you can see the crew in the background.
Oh,
Oh my gosh. Why not just punch in on that stuff? Did they not shoot it in 4K? Good Lord.
Oh, well, I don't think they cared at that point. I think it was like, well, we got a real show going on here. It's either go to lunch or edit that out. So they went to lunch. So that was pretty bad.
Oh my God. So, I mean, for you to notice it, it's got to be blatant. I mean, this wasn't like one of those random extras wandering in the back corner or something wearing a t-shirt.
During a C-stand or whatever.
Oh yeah, no. This was the entire crew visible in a mirror as they're getting on the bus. I mean, like a guy, I'm really convinced. I was watching it on my iPad, so it was a little hard to tell, but I think a guy's actually eating a sandwich while he's standing there watching them shoot this. So it's really bad. Then this is one of those, kind of quirky things that I catch because I'm a gun guy, but one of the police officers fires his gun and it's empty. So the slide locks back. And then the sound effects, he fires 2 more times. So he's out of ammo. He stopped firing, but
they added the sound effect.
They added it in the sound effect. And it, again, I don't know whether they didn't care, didn't know, whatever, but they just kept throwing stuff in there. So one thing that I found out about this movie as I was looking at some of the trivia, this whole thing was shot in 17 days. I would have to say they could have shot it in about 17 hours if they really worked hard, and it would have been just as good. But it was a 17.
And there's no excuse. That was how long it took to shoot my movie.
Yeah. Well, right. Like I know of good movies that were shot in 17 days. So this is pathetic. But you can tell almost as you're going through where they shot things in order of shooting, because you can tell that Edward Furlong is getting really disgusted with this movie as it goes on. Early on, he seems to be taking it somewhat seriously. By the end, he's like, this is bullshit. I got to move on to something better.
Are we still on this movie?
Yes. And that's kind of how I feel about this review. Like I've probably gone longer than this movie deserves, but at least having John Connor get a mention is worth something, I guess.
John Connor.
But this is a horrible movie. And there is one point, and this has come up in a couple of these other reviews too. One of the big creatures is crawling up out of a river and about to destroy a bridge, but normal traffic is just going by on the road. Nobody's reacting to it. So they obviously just shot some footage at some point or bought some footage of downtown New Orleans on just a normal day, threw this creature in by crayon probably, and didn't bother to get it while there was a major accident or people fleeing for a hurricane or anything like that would have actually made sense.
Oh, yeah, that's happened, like you said, a couple of times where it's obvious they didn't bother, they didn't have enough money or enough bandwidth for a third unit director to deal with extras and have extras motivated and doing something on the set. They just said, you know what, just film people in the background and we'll just let it be in the background.
Oh, like, yeah.
Because what was the one that had the 2 monsters fighting and nobody was paying attention?
And they all ran the wrong direction. Yeah. Well, in this one, there's actually a scene, and I think it was shot on Bourbon Street, where they're getting into the into this kind of bus thing, and they're all panicked and running to get in, and there are people in the background looking at them shoot the scene. And they're like, you almost get the sense that they're standing behind the cones, staring at them shoot the scene, and not reacting to anything. So this is probably one of the best movies to use of how not to make a movie. I think that probably it could be used at UCLA Film School as the worst example of film science. But again, I mean, it was better than strangely watchable Halloween or Space Trucker Bruce. it's a step above those, and at least it is. It was a movie I was able to get through in one sitting.
Oh, good.
So
Well-
I didn't go wash dishes or cut grass while the movie continued to play. I at least had the investment in it to finish it. And there's, I could kind of go on and on about how
I'd rather you
and
not.
terrible it is, but I think I've more than covered it. But if you like crappy movies, this is probably one of the few that we've reviewed this year that is actually worth sitting down and watching.
Amanda, this reminds me of something I read a long time ago. Is it takes almost the same amount of work to make a crappy movie as a great movie. It's just the attention to detail and focus is really the big difference.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just, well, I noticed too, in the same problems that you have on like a large budget film versus a small, it's like still the same problems. You just have more money to throw at it.
Right. Right. or it's a more complex shoot, but the same people are on behind the scenes, and I'm always amazed at when I see how much effort was spent to try to make a set or make a setting or tell a story. And it's like, did you not know you had a crappy story to start with? Shouldn't you have known that before you actually got on set?
Right.
And sometimes I wonder how much.
No, I've read stuff that I mean, even when I was like at Disney and elsewhere, that I'm just like, how did they buy the script? I don't get it. Why is this being made? Why is this a good idea to spend $150 million on this?
Well, here's a question for you then. How much of it, though, and this is what I always wonder, how much of it is when producers meddle too much with the production?
It can be a number of things for sure. I mean, there are obviously vice versa scripts that are amazing, and then the movie's crap, and you're like, what happened? Like, I know a friend of mine wrote this really wonderful script, and I won't say what the movie is. But then the producers got their hands on it, and then like he watched it, and he like walked out, and he's like, "That's not my movie."
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Wow.
I've heard that from writers. I've heard that from a lot of writers that said they loved the script, but then they decided, well, but would it be better if? And then they put like 17 other things in there that had nothing to do. And next thing you know, I'm like, I don't even recognize my story anymore.
Let's do a nice like dramatic thriller about Jack the Ripper, but now let's make it a musical.
It'll be fun for the kids. Merchandising. What are we going to sell to the kids at Christmas? All right, let's move on to our next segment. And this is a news segment. We always comb the internet for those wonderful stories that we call
It's No Bullshit.
And Walt, you've got the first story.
Well, this one comes to us from Otay Mesa, California, which I've never heard of. And these people are genius. The CBP seizes $2.5 million worth of meth hidden in a watermelon shipment.
Okay, that's creative.
This is creative. A trailer carrying a shipment of watermelons through a checkpoint of Otay Mesa wasn't just hauling fruit. There was $2.5 million worth of methamphetamine mixed in with the watermelons, official confirmed. About 6:45 a.m. Tuesday, U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers working at the Otay Mesa commercial facility inspected a tractor trailer pulling a shipment that was manifested as watermelon. According to the agency news release, canine officers screened the trailer and alerted officers to the watermelon shipment. Inside the shipment, officers found 193 packages concealed within the watermelon crate. In total, it contained approximately 1,100 pounds of meth.
Wow.
Worth $2.5 million.
Now, does it say it was in the watermelon or just in the crate?
Okay, so that is the
That's
interesting
my
thing. They actually, it looks like real watermelon wrapped around these bags of meth. So they went to a lot of trouble to hide this stuff.
So what they do, like cored out and hollowed out the watermelon, stuffed the meth, and then like glued the the end
that's
back
exactly
in?
what it looks like.
Wow.
So they went to a lot of
hey
trouble.
Man, this watermelon's good.
Yeah. Well, CBP seized the tractor trailer and the narcotics. The driver, a 47-year-old Mexican citizen, was turned over to agents with U.S. Customs and Border Security. He was booked into the Metropolitan Correction Center in San Diego County on suspicion of drug smuggling. So these guys really went to a lot of trouble. Kudos to them, because it really does look like watermelon, but that wasn't enough to slip it by the canines. But $2.5 million in meth.
It's no bullshit.
That's
They would have
crazy.
better luck like taking books and howling them out and sticking it in there, you know? I mean,
I think they would. Obviously, watermelon does not cover the scent of meth.
No, apparently not. I'm wondering who the person was, the genius who said, "Oh yeah, it'll mask the scent. No problem. No dog's going to be able to smell that much meth in the middle of a watermelon rind."
Yeah, I think it was the amount that became the problem.
Probably. But you know what? That also reminds me. Watermelon may be the universal fruit of the criminal. Remember the guy that tried to rob the Quickie Mart and didn't have a mask, and so he hollowed out the top half of a watermelon and wore it as a mask?
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's a genius move.
But
That
then he
is a
couldn't see
genius
because it
move.
kept shifting, and he was like, "Oh."
I'm watermelon head.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be a new supervillain.
It's a whole different class of villain.
The
Yes.
next Marvel villain, watermelon head, man.
Well, I'm going to take it a different direction for folks in our next news story here that are living in the East Coast and know anything about Brood X. Amanda, have you heard about Brood X getting ready to hatch?
No.
Okay, so we know cicadas are big in the South. They go all the way up through from the Mason-Dixon down. And there's multiple different broods, but this one's Brood X, or the 10th brood, that comes out every 17 years. So here's something fascinating. These cicadas may actually find their butts falling off because they've been infected with a fungus. And that made me want to read further. I said, wait a minute, your butt is falling off?
That should be the headline.
Yeah, no kidding.
Now, according to this, billions and billions of cicadas are getting ready to take flight. They'll blacken the skies, and that happens. Every year there's normal broods, but there's so many different broods that it takes this one 17 years to hatch. Well, this one apparently has been infected with something called Massapora cicadina. It's a funky fungus that actually gets inside, and it's a parasitic kind of relationship with the actual cicada. What happens is it gets inside, starts to swell, and as it's growing out, eating the inside of the cicada, it causes the butt to actually pop off and leave the bit of fungus on the back where the butt was. Now, why does the cicada allow this to happen? This is right up your alley, Walt. What it does is this fungus actually creates a magic mushroom effect. It produces a chemical called psilocybin. In humans, psilocybin causes Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, I know psilocybin. Yeah.
Okay. So psilocybin causes a distorted sense of time and reality, hallucinations, and an intense sense of unity with the universe. They're also open to a strong senses of suggestion. So I guess you can tell your cicada to do things and it will just randomly do it. You can only imagine how the chemical must affect cicadas. On top of the psilocybin, researchers have found infected cicadas also have amphetamines in their system as a result of this fungus. The cocktail of mind-bending drugs essentially allows the fungus to take full control of the cicada. It becomes, quote, a willing, zombified puppet of the new fungal overlord. How's that for the next movie you get to review?
I feel like there's a script in there somewhere.
Somewhere in there. Check this out, though. This article actually goes on and says this isn't the only thing that has a weird, almost sci-fi horror effect on at least our insect brethren. I was reading further. There is something called the kamikaze horsehair worm. This cooked spaghetti-looking thing infests crickets and grasshoppers that have acquired it through infected mayfly or mosquito larvae. Once the worm is actually inside the cricket or inside the grasshopper, it attacks their central nervous system, forcing them to find the nearest body of water to jump in and drown themselves. Why? Because those larvae have to hatch in water. They literally will explode out alien fashion from the cricket or grasshopper once they're in water.
Whoa.
I had not heard about that. And there's a green-banded broodsack, another kind of worm with a particularly disgusting name. This little guy, however, takes over snails. Check this out. When a snail comes into contact with infected bird poop, the worm enters the snail and crawls into the eye stalks, causing them to grow and swell to gigantic size, turning green in color and beginning to pulsate like caterpillars themselves.
Gross.
The broodsack then steers its now mindless host to a sunny spot, purposely attracting a bird to eat it which then, of course, allows the larvae to go back inside the bird to then be dropped out the bird poop to do it all over again. Thank goodness we don't have to worry about these things in our day-to-day life.
It's no bullshit.
Wow.
Sounds like an alien to me.
Isn't it? I mean, I wonder, if
that is crazy,
this whole idea of this parasitic growth, just growing and taking you over. So, if you see a bunch of cicadas with a bunch of fungus on their butts, well, they don't mind because they're high as a kite.
Wow.
I told you these were crazy news stories. Walt, you got the next one.
I do. I'm kind of sticking with our drugs and food theme from earlier. Carl Stewart's love of cheese led police right to his door. A block of Stinton cheese led to the downfall of a EncroChat drug dealer. This comes from echo.com. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to pronounce all the stuff in this, but a block of cheese proved to be the undoing of a man involved in a massive drug conspiracy. Carl Stewart used the EncroChat encryption service in a bid to evade detection, adopting the handle of Toffee Force to cover his tracks as he supplied large amounts of Class A and Class B drugs to people. But the encryption device was busted by law enforcement agencies. Stewart was identified after sharing an image of a block of cheese in the palm of his hand from which his fingerprints were identified.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
Stewart, 39, of Jim Street, Vauxhall, appeared at Liverpool Crown Court for sentencing after he pled guilty to conspiracy to supply cocaine, conspiracy to supply heroin, conspiracy to supply MDMA, and conspiracy to supply ketamine and transferring criminal property. Today, he was jailed for 13 years and 6 months. Detective Inspector Lee Wilkinson said, "Today we have seen another significant sentencing as part of the national Operation Ventec, which came about after law enforcement officials in Europe managed to crack the EncroChat service being used by criminals involved in serious and organized crime to carry out their business. Carl Stewart was involved in supplying large amounts of drugs, but was caught out of his love for Stinton cheese after sharing a picture of a block in it in his hand through the app. His palm and fingerprints were analyzed from the pictures, and it was established they belonged to Stewart."
It's no bullshit.
So a picture of this guy's hand holding a block of cheese allowed the police to analyze his fingerprints and find out who he was.
Wow. I've heard of cheese getting you kind of all bound up, but I didn't know it was going to get you also locked up.
Yep, that's kind of the
Amanda's cringing at the dad joke there. All right, Amanda.
Yeah, that was pretty cheesy, Alan.
It was very cheesy. I know you need to go in about 5 minutes. Why don't we do this? Do you want to join us for we can just jump to our entertainment segment quickly. If you want to tell us about what you're watching, reading, and listening, and then I can go back and finish my news story if you want to do it out of order, or do you have to go now?
Yeah, I got to wrap this up just in a few minutes. So
okay. Why don't we do this? We'll ask you now, since you've got to go. We will get to our entertainment segment between me and Walt, but we always like to know and give our listeners something to maybe listen, try out on maybe a show and maybe a book that they're reading. So let's start off. Is there anything you're watching as a writer, as a director, as somebody who wants to make films and movies and shows? What might you be watching that our listeners might want to check out?
Well, I mean, I know it's a little bit older now, but I'm watching You right now on Netflix, and it's really good. I mean, the actors are really good. It's just the production value is great, and I'm really enjoying that. So I'm a little hooked in. You
is on Netflix. Okay. What's that about?
It's about this guy who is incredibly obsessed with this one woman, and he just knows everything about her life. And it's like, stalker taken to 200%. And he just kind of infiltrates her life and eventually does become her boyfriend. And because he gets to know all the stuff about her, and he just weasels his way into her world. It's dark, but it's fascinating.
Wow, that sounds great. I end up binging things. That's okay. If you bring up something, we have people who say, you know what, during the pandemic, I went back and watched like these old World War II movies that were available. It doesn't matter, whatever you're watching. So You is a recommendation. Anything else you'd recommend or something that you're watching that you're enjoying?
I'm trying to think of anything else I've seen recently. I've been spending more time editing and writing lately, so I haven't been watching nearly as much, but that's just something that I happen to catch up on. And The Boys I really like.
The Boys, that's great. Are you on season 1 or season 2?
Season 1.
Okay,
I'm
it's
just
fantastic.
coming to the end of season 1. That is a great show.
All right, well, since I know you got to go, is there anything you're reading right now? Any books, any articles, anything that might be of interest that for our listeners?
Well, I'm not that far into it, so I can't really recommend it yet, but I've started reading this book about the Archbishop John Hughes, who was the Archbishop in New York City back in like the 1840s and 1860s. He was otherwise known as Dagger John. And this dude was like a massive badass. And I went through this tour of the catacombs when I was there with my editor. And it was just, they had like a little statue of him, like, who is this guy? And so there was a whole book on him. And I was like, that sounds like a fascinating movie. So I'm actually reading the book to see if that might be a thing.
Very cool. Folks, you heard it here.
interesting.
It could very well be, 5 years from now, all of a sudden we start reading about Dagger John, the Archbishop. I think that's really cool. And finally, and so that way we can let you go. And like I said, Walt and I will then catch up on the other things. Is there anything you're listening to, whether that's music or a podcast, anything that you find that you just kind of need as your distraction from the day to day?
I listen to old school stuff, like my iPod that I go on like my walks. I listen from anything to like Rob Zombie on there, to like the original Mortal Kombat soundtrack, to like Enya. So it's all over the place. So I would,
That's cool. You mentioned Enya. We're going to have a new age group called 2002. They're going to be joining us in a couple of weeks. So we'll send you an email when that pops out. So you might want to check it out. But if you've never heard of 2002, they are very much that blend of Yanni, Ray Lynch, Enya, that sort of new age, very cool music. You can almost hear it as a soundtrack in times. Sometimes it ends up being a little more folklore funky, and sometimes it's a little more spacey, but I think it's really, really cool stuff.
Ooh, I'll have to check that out.
Check them out. And what about podcasts? Since Walt met you on a podcast site, are there any podcasts that you're associated with or that you're listening to right now?
I've listened to TED Talks, but outside of that, like I haven't had a lot of time to listen to much else.
Okay.
So.
Amanda, thank you so very much for taking so much time out of your schedule. I know as busy as you are with so many irons in the fire, I know I really appreciate you taking time to tell your story and be with us here in the Listener's Lounge.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for having me. This has been just a blast. So
and particularly thanks for taking the time while you're spending time with your family. That was much appreciated, and thank them for us.
Yeah,
I will.
We'll let you know when it comes out so that way you can share it with all your friends and family.
Right. Will do.
Take care, Amanda. See you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
I got my last news story. You ready?
Yep, fire away.
All right. This one is great. I'm just going to read the headline, and then from there, it only gets better. This story, 7 arrested after cops find cult leader's mummified corpse in a Colorado home.
Okay. I'd like to hear more about this.
Now, look, being a Catholic at heart, raised, born in a Catholic family and understanding the whole idea of veneration of the dead saints, it's a feature of a lot of religions, not just Catholicism, but the idea that there are folks who are so important on this earth that when they've moved on to the next plane, that they can intercede in your behalf and gain the sense of sainthood. But those saints' earthly remains usually aren't stored in a sleeping bag wrapped in Christmas lights, are they?
No, they are not.
Well, that's how police discovered the body of Amy Carlson, age 45, leader of a Colorado-based cult called Love Has Won.
Oh, boy.
Her followers knew her by the name Mother God. The cops arrived at the home in Moffett, Colorado, after a report of one of the cult members. The follower, who has not been charged with any crime, said he had recently taken in a group of people who needed a place to stay. However, when he returned to his home on April 28th from a trip to Denver, he found a corpse in his house. That's when the man decided it's time for law enforcement to step in. In the house, the police indeed find Carlson's lifeless body. When questioned, the cult's followers claimed the body belonged to a woman called Leah. For some reason, they just gave her a completely different name, as if they wouldn't be able to figure this out for themselves.
Okay.
According to the police, Carlson had already been dead for a good while, their words, when they discovered her corpse. In fact, she had already started to mummify.
Yikes.
Yeah. The county coroner, Tom Perrin, said that Carlson had died at least 30 days prior. According to police affidavits, the Love Has Won members had wrapped Carlson's body in the sleeping bag. She had then been placed on a makeshift shrine and decorated with Christmas lights. That's how I want to go. I want to know my followers thought that was the highest form of respect for my passing body, to wrap me in a sleeping bag and adorn me with Christmas lights on a makeshift shrine.
The sleeping bag I can kind of get, but the Christmas lights really add a flair that you just don't get with normal corpses.
She had a glow in life that she was able to carry on in death. According to the police report, the mummified remains appear to be set up in some type of shrine with glitter-type makeup adorning the eyes. Well, of course, if you're going to go, you want to look good.
Absolutely.
Carlson's actual cause of death is still currently under investigation. However, it was known she suffered from cancer. 7 people who were at the house when police found the body were arrested. The county sheriff's office said they are being held under suspicion of desecrating a corpse and also, unfortunately, child abuse, because there was a 13-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy also present in the home, paying homage to the passing of their mother god, who was wrapped up in a sleeping bag and adorned with Christmas lights. The boy, the son of the man who actually reported the corpse, has eventually been returned back to his home, while the 13-year-old girl is in the care of social services.
It's amazing, it's astounding, but it's no bullshit.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Just rule of thumb, if you're ever starting to get involved in a religious organization where pretty much everybody you've ever met would go, yeah, that's kind of nuts, it's probably kind of nuts.
Yeah, take them at their word.
Probably need to avoid that. Just, particularly if Mother God's involved. It's not going the right direction. Or Kool-Aid.
The story goes on a lot longer. I will spare you the rest of the nonsensical details, but apparently this group was convinced that she was now in the spiritual plane, and their job was to help guide her by still worshiping the body form to make sure her journey went by okay and all this other nonsense. And then you find out there's only about 20 people in this particular cult in Colorado, but because they had a Facebook page, they've got supporters from around the world, which just goes to show you there's something out there for everybody.
Yeah, wow. That's pretty scary.
All right, let's get to our entertainment segment. And this is that time where we get to tell you what we've been watching, what we're reading, and what we're listening to. And because Amanda had to leave, she's already given us her items. Well, now let's get to you. We'll start with watching. What have you been watching this past week?
There are 2 things I want to mention. One of them is kind of an older show that I stumbled back across on Netflix. Did you ever watch the show Jericho?
No, I think my wife started watching it. Wasn't that on regular TV?
It was. I don't remember which network.
Was it like some kind of after some like? Was it is that the story where there was some sort of a what do you call it? The electromagnetic pulse that got rid of all electricity, and so everybody was trying to rebuild from nothing.
Yes,
primitive type things.
It's set in a town called Jericho. It's like Oklahoma or Nevada or Nebraska, somewhere out west.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting because there are several people who just kind of got trapped in Jericho. They were passing through. One guy was back home visiting his parents. And so because everything goes down, no power, no radios, no internet, no nothing, they're getting very spotty news from what's going on around the country. And in the first episode, not to spoil it, but a kid finds out that this is happening all over the country. And they actually see the nuclear blast from Denver, we find out, but they find out that this is going on all over the country. So it's a very interesting show, kind of apocalyptic, obviously, but also really a study in human nature. And it is really fascinating. So again, several years old, but check out Jericho on Netflix. The other one that I wanted to mention is an animated show called Invincible, and that is on Amazon Prime. There are a couple of things that I'm not as thrilled about with it, but overall it's good. The animation is awesome. The storyline is going in the right direction, but it is a superhero, a cartoon, I guess, animated series that has the main character coming of age as he's beginning to develop his superhero powers that he has gotten from his dad. So really good so far. I really like some of the characters and the way that they're handling it. Definitely pokes fun at some of the other superheroes that we've known and loved over the years. But really excellent show. So check that out. I'll probably hit the next thing and be like, oh crap, why did I recommend that? But I'm several episodes in and it's good so far.
Okay. I'll talk about that when I get to mine, because I actually watched the whole thing in 2 days. So, but before I do that, what else have you been watching, or is that it?
Yeah, I think I'll stick with those. I've got a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm kind of a one here, one there. But the NHL playoffs are on, so that's taking up a lot of my time.
Gotcha. Well, let me talk about Invincible. This is another comic book that Robert Kirkman brought to life. He has actually written this comic book. Apparently, there's about 144 issues. I don't know if it's still ongoing. I just know that there's 144 issues of it, and it's been adapted. I don't know how many seasons it will take, but rather than The Walking Dead that was live action, he took his comic book and then turned around and made it into an animated special. It is very much adult in the sense of the language, in the sense of the graphic violence that occurs in the episodes. I'm waiting for you to finish, because I got to the end and I said there is a huge problem for me in why this happened and why it happened at this time. And of course, it's the whole crux of the subplot with Omni-Man, which is the guy you find out he's from another planet, and it's his son who's half Earthling, half this other race that he was waiting to see. Will your powers develop? Will your powers develop? And as they're starting to develop, if you've watched the end, and which is kind of weird, it's one of those series that it'll have ending credits like you think it's over, but there's always like a denouement, another 5 or 6 minutes of something to watch at the end, almost like a cutscene, but it's still part of the comic book story that you have to watch. You can't just say, oh, it's over, I can stop it now. Keep watching, because there's always something more. And that event at the end of the first episode, to me, still isn't answered by the end of season 1. And I'm like, I don't get why he did what he did. He never really explained it. He never really justified it, but he did it anyway. And I'm waiting. I need to wait for you to get all finished so you and I can have one of those really detailed discussions, and I don't want to have any spoilers in your head.
Okay. I will look forward to that.
Because maybe I missed
I'll
something.
finish it this week.
Okay.
I'm betting it's a hook for season 2.
Oh yeah, and it's definitely going to have another season. There's no doubt about it. The voice talents of the people behind it are really, really good.
Oh, they're great.
Very much enjoyed watching something animated that reminded me almost like a throwback to Justice League. You know, watching that, the DC Justice League, where the good guys were in one fortress and the other bad guys were in the other fortress, and there was always this teams of bad guys doing something, so the Justice League always had to save the Earth from something. So, I mean, that part was definitely part of the nostalgia.
And there's also a little homage to that in the style of the animation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really cool.
I was hooked enough that after I got done with episode 1, I said, I'm going to watch episode 2. And then I watched episode 3, and then it was like really late, so I had to stop. And then I watched the remaining the next night, just one after the other after the other. It was engaging enough to want to keep watching. I was just left with questions. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
So I would say definitely a thumbs up to watch it. The other thing I watched, and we just watched it, I left you a message, but you didn't respond text-wise. With the passing just recently of Charles Grodin, one of the things that's popped up as my, available to watch was a movie I never caught in the 80s when it was first released, and that was the buddy flick Midnight Run with a bail bondsman who was having to go bring somebody back that the FBI was looking for, the mob was looking for, different bounty hunters were looking for, and it starred Robert De Niro, Charles Grodin, Yaphet Kotto, John Ashton was in it, who I remembered famously from Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2. Joe Pantoliano, Dennis Farina. Great cast.
Great cast.
One of the things I will tell you is I was pulled a little out of it by the soundtrack, which normally I would have liked, but it was very campy for that era.
It was.
And sometimes I was like, it's almost like goofy, the music happening with what's going on screen. But I did enjoy the dialogue. I enjoyed the adventure. So first time I'd ever seen it. So I probably should have filmed myself. I could have made a YouTube reaction channel of my first reaction to Midnight Run. But I did, in fact, enjoy it.
Yeah, I think your assessment of the soundtrack is interesting because the last time I saw it, which was probably 2 or 3 years ago, I thought this would have been better if it had contemporary music in it.
Right.
And I really hate that they didn't do that.
Well, and it was a product of its time. It was late 80s, 1988 when it came out. But seeing a young Robert De Niro play one of the first sort of, I wouldn't call him a lighthearted character, but sort of a movie that has lighthearted moments and comedic moments. It was fun to see Robert De Niro dipping his toe into that, quote, comedy mold that he would become so much better at later in his career.
I think one of the things I liked about that movie is that it was serious, but that it was kind of real life, and that they had those moments of humor and just it felt very real.
Well, I will tell you, if you are sensitive to the F-bomb, these guys, it was very much mobsterish, and everyone was using it as a punctuation mark in just about every sentence. So it was heavily laced with profanity. Didn't bother me, but I was watching it with my father-in-law who was visiting, and I was worried that he was being a little turned off by it, but he seemed to enjoy it.
Huh, well, that's good. It is a good movie, and it's gritty. It definitely is gritty. So if you don't like gritty movies and don't like the F word, probably not the best one for you.
So that's what I've been watching. Binging that Invincible and then watching Midnight Run.
Yeah,
right.
Midnight Run's great. That's a great movie. And was that on Amazon Prime?
I'm trying to remember what service it took me to because it was listed. You know how I've got a Fire Stick, so there's sort of like that overall menu.
Sure.
And there was like suggestions, and I don't know what service it actually took me to, if it was Netflix or Amazon Prime, but it was free. And it was because of the passing of Charles Grodin, I think, is why it all of a sudden showed up.
Yeah, it was a sad loss. He was a great actor. He's in a lot of really fantastic stuff.
Yeah, but he had a long career and, doing what he loves. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to what are we reading, if anything?
Okay, so this is kind of an unusual book for us to recommend. A little heady, but I've had some stuff going on, and I actually had 3 different people recommend this book to me this week or last week. So I picked it up and started reading it, and it's really excellent. It's called Boundaries. It's by a clinical psychiatrist named Dr. Cloud, and it really just talks about how to deal with people in your life and to draw boundaries with them in a healthy way. And it has really helped me open my eyes to some things that I really needed to work on as far as how I use my time, how I give my time to people, how I, spend emotional energy with some folks that I probably shouldn't. And it helps me to kind of focus with my kids on how to help them do the same thing. That if they're running around with people they shouldn't be, or if people are trying to kind of pull on their time that they need to use for other things like homework and cleaning the house and things like that. And it really is a great book that's helping me rethink some things in my life that I am long overdue. So anyway, Boundaries by I think it's Henry Cloud. Really excellent so far. And like I said, recommended by a few people that I really respect and trust. So if you're looking for something a little heady, something a little bit relationship oriented, definitely a good one to check out.
I didn't read it recently, but it reminds me of a book that I had been recommended a while ago for other things that were happening at my life at that time. And it was called Rewire Your Anxious Brain. And it was really for the person who, the way our brains are really like computers. They really are programmed through repetition. And the way you fix it is you have to reprogram it with different repetition. And the crux of the book was, we tend to spiral ourselves out of control, which creates anxiety because we spiral into the what if, then this, then this, then this, and we start panicking. And then we can actually bring things to fruition because we've been so worried about, oh my God, I'm going to miss my deadline. Oh my God, I'm going to miss my deadline. Oh my God. And then you end up missing your deadline. So you bring it to truth. And it's learning to rewire your thinking to not let yourself start to spiral. When you start feeling yourself getting in that trap, to try to not let yourself get in that trap. And that has been one of those techniques that I know I have for the longest time started to employ, which really helped deal with what people were saying about me or what people were going to do or whether or not I was pleasing people around me or did I say the right or the wrong thing on air. And when you stop worrying about that, it's amazing how much that anxiety that you felt you were actually creating on your own. It wasn't true anxiety from something else. It was sort of fake or faux, still every bit as real feeling, but really had no basis in reality. It was all playing the what if game instead of waiting for something to actually be a problem before addressing it.
Yeah, something that one of the books that I can't remember if it was this one or another one that I've read recently said, if you're worried about what other people are thinking about you, stop, because they're probably not thinking about you. And that's something to really kind of get into our head, is that we get all wrapped up in, well, are they going to say something about the way I'm dressed? Are they going to say something about, whatever? Probably not, because people have their own lives to live, and they're not micro analyzing yours. So, and if they are, they're wasting their time and they need to go find something else to do. So just not getting caught up in all that and in the emotion of how other people think about me and all that is really important just for our own mental health.
You know, what's funny is I had a meeting today with a director of our downtown development authority. And one of the things she said is, I recognize I want to be a people pleaser. And I said, the problem with being a people pleaser is when you try to please everybody, you unwittingly screw up or mess up what, like, randomly, you have no idea who you're going to upset because you're trying to please everybody, that you're going to drop the ball somewhere. And I said, what you have to learn to do is eventually pick the person that you don't mind saying no to and just say, no, I can't do this. I don't have time. Don't commit to doing it if you don't have the bandwidth. Sure, they'll be upset, but you won't tick off the other 15 people you've made commitments to, Right. Know your bandwidth and don't be afraid to say no. And that is really hard for some people, especially if you are a people pleaser.
Yeah. And one of the examples that Dr. Cloud uses in this book is that this lady has commitments at home, commitments at work, commitments with her kids. And then somebody calls and says, hey, we need you to help out with this thing at church. And she says, well, I'm really, really busy right now. I don't think I can do this. And they're like, but we always depend on you. You always step up. And so instead of saying no and letting them move on to the next person, she, being the people pleaser, says yes. And then it's like everything comes unwound. And it just, you can only do so much in figuring out how much that is. And you know what? We also need time for ourselves to do things we enjoy. So there's some good lessons in all that.
Learning, and I know all of a sudden this is taking a weird turn in the middle of our discussion, but
yeah, I know.
Learning, it's the old Clint Eastwood. It's funny, you can use a cliche from a cultural reference, but it is 1000% true. Man's got to know his limitations.
That's right. And
you've got to figure out where your bandwidth is. How much room can you fit on your plate? There are some people out there that are great at balancing 15 different things all at the same time. If you're not one of those people, don't commit to 15 things all at the same time. Know your limitations. You can learn as you get better at it, but you've got to learn. And it's hard because it requires introspection and being self-aware, and most people aren't self-aware.
No, we are not.
All right, let's get to our final segment, our final section here. What are we listening to?
Well, there are two podcasts I want to recommend, and then one album that I want to recommend real quick that is just kind of blown me away the last couple of weeks, or the last few days, I guess. The first thing is there is a podcast that is in production now called Camp Hell, and it is about a rehab center that was here in Georgia back in the 70s and 80s called Anawake. And I actually remember some of my friends going to
I know. I've
Anawake
heard that
because,
name.
yeah, that like their parents found drugs in their room, or they were, kind of, getting messed up on stuff or having emotional issues. So they'd send them to this camp in Awakey, and it had this great reputation. The director had a great reputation, but it ended up being this horribly abusive and terrible place. And so, uh, Camp Hell kind of, one of the things I guess that they're trying to do is help people identify when there are problem places like this, but it's horrifying and fascinating all at the same time. So Camp Hell, Anawake is definitely worth listening to. I think Wondery does it, but whoever produced this really did a great job with it. Then on the polar opposite end is the Thrilling Adventure Hour, and it is a fantastically funny podcast. It's Paul F. Tompkins is the primary character in this thing. Paul is a great improv comic, and he brings on other improv comics, and they will each week do kind of an old like 40s radio serial kind of show, but they are always hysterical. So if you're even just looking for like a one-off, I need an hour just to laugh while I'm driving, check out the Thrilling Adventure Hour. It is absolutely hilarious. Paul F. Tompkins is a genius, and he brings on some of the greatest people working in comedy today.
And what about the album or music?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So, Old Sea Brigade, we had Ben Kramer on last year. His new album has come out. It's called Motivational Speaking, and it is really fantastic. I have listened to it probably 2 or 3 times all the way through the last couple weeks, or the last week since I got it. And it is just a great album to either sit and listen to or to have on in the background while you're doing other things. Very peaceful and calming. Great lyrics. It's just another great album by Old Sea Brigade. So check that out.
Oh, very cool. I had so much fun chatting with him, and I know he was in the midst of working and tweaking. He had nothing else doing in the middle of the pandemic.
Yes.
So it's nice. It'd be nice to go back now and hear the fruits of all that labor.
It's really good. And he has a unique style and a unique voice. So that makes it even more fun.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to be very quick with mine. I will say we were mentioned in the Radio Labyrinth guys have been doing, if you've been listening to them, they've gone to a couple of shows a week. They always have a Saturday show as well as a Monday show or Tuesday show where they record on Monday. And they mentioned us right after they had their first get together over at Mike Hall's Pizza Place up in Conyers. And Tim was talking about that they may be dropping back to one show a week when the impending bundle of joy comes along. And they were talking about, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to do without you? And it's like, well, why don't you, one of them, you can get the Wilder Ride guys, get Alan and Walt in here and let them, have some fun. So who knows if they'll call on us or not. We're going to have Jeff Lieboff from that Radio Labyrinth join us in a couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when that bundle of joy arrives. But it's so funny because I was going to reach out to Tim and say, if you just need a couple of idiots to step in and help fill up content, let us know. We'd be more than happy to help on an episode or two while you're absent.
Absolutely.
So,
and that's a fun audience and a great podcast.
Check out Radio Labyrinth, 60MW podcast from across the pond. Those guys are always hysterical. And the Marriage Fit podcast, my wife and I do that one. And we just recently dropped an episode where we had an honest to goodness marriage counselor join us. And it was great because we talked about a lot of the things we've already mentioned in the season and kind of got validation from an actual clinical or a licensed therapist that those things that we were doing were the things that he would be recommending, and that the advice we were giving is some of the advice that he himself likes people to give. And he was very, very happy to be on the show and actually said, I'd love to be back sometime just so that, because there's so many issues that we could flesh out and maybe in podcast form get people who are afraid to go see a therapist to recognize there's nothing to fear in asking for help.
No, there is not. And I really need to listen to your show. I've been unwinding a marriage while y'all have been doing your show, so it hasn't felt as relevant to me, but kind of as I'm moving to the backside of getting through all that, definitely going to start checking out your show, make sure that as I'm moving forward, I'm thinking the right things about marriages and all that fun stuff. So,
well, the cool thing about that one, and what I like about all the ones we're doing, is rather than necessarily having to listen to everyone in order, it's always kind of fun to know what's happened since the last episode, but they're all individual. And to be able to go listen to that one, I think no matter what, gives you tools for any relationship, a friendship, a brother, a mom and a dad, or whatever, as well as a spouse. It's so much about relationships, just like anything else, require attention and focus, and you have to feed the relationship. His big analogy is you have to eat every day to live. And if you eat a bunch of shit, then don't be surprised when your body turns to shit. Well, if you've put nothing but shit in your relationship, don't be surprised if that's all your relationship is. You have to nurture it, feed it, take care of it. And a lot of times we take it for granted because we just assume it's always supposed to be there. So it was great stuff just to have sort of as a high level. It wasn't diagnosing anything. We weren't getting into the minutia. It was more about, hey, just some things to think about doing so that way you don't let yourself get caught up in a relationship that ends up falling apart.
yeah. And years ago, I heard somebody say that you don't need to worry as much about finding the right person, even though that's important, but you need to worry mostly about being the right person. And I think that's important advice in every kind of relationship we have.
So I think you might enjoy it even in the midst of what you're going through, because we can always learn a little bit more about how to just be better people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be a better you.
Yeah, Lord knows I could be a better me.
All right, we are out of time. Let's go ahead and wrap this up with a bow. Walt, for folks who might be listening for the very first time, how do people learn a little bit more about us and maybe get to vote on that next movie you get to watch?
Yes, join us over at the Wilder Ride listeners group. Go facebook.com/the Wilder Ride. Follow us there, and then a button's going to pop up to join our listeners group. You'll be asked 3 simple questions. Answer those real quick, just so we know you're not a bot or whatever. And Alan or I will hit the button to let you in the group. And it's all, entertainment and what's going on in the podcast. And then once a week, the the inevitable terrible movie poll, where y'all get to decide what crappy movie I'm going to be subjected to.
Just remember, you post the poll, so you're picking the 3 to start with.
Well, and one of my rules, basically, except for 1 week, has been I don't watch the movies before I post the names. So I'm going strictly off of a list on Amazon Prime and what's free that month, because I'm not going to spend any money on these pieces of garbage. So even though Space Trucker Bruce pulled a fast one on me, between the time I posted it and the time I watched it, it went from being on Prime for free to having to pay $2 to watch that piece of crap. But
that's like hazard duty pay now.
That was. So, which reminds me, go to our Patreon page and join us there at one of our levels of support. Help me defray the cost of Space Trucker Bruce and the damage it did to my soul. And
the damage it did to your soul. The dread pirate Roberts is here for your soul.
Yes, I felt like I really lost something after that, so dignity or something. So, but do check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/the Wilder Ride. There's some great content out there too that you can listen to just by helping us out a little bit to support the podcast.
And speaking of our patrons, very quickly, I want to give a quick shout out. I'm going to just read them in order from my Patreon list. I want to say a big shout out to, at all different levels here, whether you're a new patron or you've been there since the very beginning, like Tara Bain, who was our very, very first patron and has not skipped a beat. I want to say a big thank you to Tara Bain, Rob Smithers, Wendy Muller, Off the Bounce Podcast, a basketball podcast with Coach Peacock, Robert E.G. Black, Ross Seymour, Robin Griffith, Wendy Corson, and Christopher Schmidt. Thank you for being patrons, and you can very quickly have your name brought up in one of our shows by being somebody who supports our show via our Patreon page. If you have a second, go and rate and review on whatever podcatcher you're listening to. That always is great to build the metrics, and more importantly, use the share function and share the episode on your social media. So that way, after you've gotten done listening, takes just a few seconds, post it out there. Who knows? Maybe somebody else is looking for that one little special gem to listen to and pass the time or fall asleep to, and they could stumble across the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge.
There you go.
With that said, Walt, anything else before we wrap up?
Well, I just want to again thank Amanda for joining us tonight. She is busy, a very busy person, and she's on vacation seeing her family. So we really appreciate Amanda and her family giving us that time this evening. And she was just a fantastic guest. So we really do appreciate that.
Well, I want to encourage everyone to come back next week. Our next scheduled guest has built a YouTube channel, starting off with no watchers, no subscribers, to passing 50,000 simply because he is a classical composer who started reacting to metal videos and metal groups like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and others. Douglas Helvering, Professor Douglas Helvering, is a classical composer. He goes by the podcast The Daily Doug. I highly encourage you to check it out. It's amazing to hear somebody who's got such an appreciation and knowledge of the composition of music, music theory, how music works, and then taking those principles and looking at genres that he never imagined he would be delving into and building a YouTube following. So very, very cool to have Douglas Helvering joining us next week. And to hear that, you're going to have to come back right here on the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. Man, I'll tell you what, that Amanda story is just makes me want to go back and start pushing my film / directing side more, that I should be doing more to look for. Hey, are you looking for a director, somebody who you can take to helm the project? Because I love that so. I mean, I love acting like she does, but I love directing too. I mean, that is just so much fun.
Yeah, well, I can see where you would be really good at it.
You got to be able to be a jerk sometimes, but you got to have a creative side, have a fun side, and who knows? I mean, I guess I have it all.
There you go.
Weird, the dance floor, you gotta be jumping jack. Jump on in, jump, jump in. Like wild train, roll right off your track.